This is Justice Matters with Tim Buxton, coming to you from Yugambeh country of the Commonberry people of the Gold Coast, Australia. I'm your host, Tim, where my sole aim is to share conversations I get to have with inspiring people doing remarkable work to create a world where we all belong. This podcast is brought to you by the Just Travel Company. Experience, wonder, and unearth justice, and discover the just way to travel today. Visit just-travel.co. Without further ado, here's our guest for this episode of Justice Matters. Well, Jody, thank you so much for coming on Justice Matters podcast. Wow, we finally got you on.
I am so excited. Anytime I get to spend time with you, it's a win.
Feelings very much mutual. One of the great things about this podcast was with which a few other podcasts that I've had the privilege of hosting is the mutual friends that are involved that have brought us together. And Jody, you are the executive director of Love Does, founded by our friend Bob Goff, who
Yes.
Known for many crazy, whimsical, wonderful things in this wonderful world of ours. But Love Does is the non-profit arm that is doing incredible things around the world, which we'll get to talk about. Primarily, though, going into conflict zones, very places that people don't normally want to go, and providing education and support and aid to and empowerment to those that are in these very difficult, challenging situations, and doing it in a very unique way. So not doing it in your traditional, let's say, NGO way, but doing with a little bit of whimsy, a little bit of who is Bob.
That is really true, Tim. And let me tell you this. Bob adores you. And your paths crossed many years ago in Iraq. And that's a tough place to work in. And since then, it has just been just a mutual relationship, just filled with just respect and love and fun and generosity. And that is you. It is, anytime I've gotten to spend time with you, you can't help but just feel like you just got a gift. And so you have a gift for making people feel great. And so it has been an awesome deal to have been around you for the last number of years. And I know Bob feels that way and more.
Aw.
So let's just
great.
stop there. No, I'm kidding. It's great.
No,
I love every time we get to talk.
We could. And without this being a mutual pat on the back session, I think a lot of people, because Bob is such a wonderful person, but you get to see, and you and I have both seen him in everyday life. And a lot of people wonder, what is it? Is this all just like, is it real? Like, is this guy really real? And again, we've spent time together. I spent time together in Bob on 3 continents. You've now worked with him for many, many years. And for those of people that don't know, I've kind of thought of, okay, if I could put him in a blender for people that might not know, it's like Fred Rogers, right? Fred Rogers' Neighborhood. Yep. It's like Tigger, which he is self would say he's like living with him is like living with a Tigger bouncing around the room. It's like, I feel like he's Jason Bourne. It's a secret identity. The stuff he does you wouldn't know, and he goes to places no one would even think of going, Somalia to Afghanistan to Iraq, where we met, and Walt Disney, like this guy that just dreams up amazingly big things and just wants this world to be and is making this world a wonderful place. But what is it like? Because I could talk about what it's like for me to come across his past and how when we were in Israel together a few months ago, he's sitting in the back of that tiny rental car that I thought I was the biggest car I could get. Yes. And there he is, squished into the back, first in to make sure you don't have to be the one stuck in the back. What's it like? What's it been like for you working with Bob? Because I just think getting your bird's eye view would just be so much fun for our listeners.
Well, what a great description of putting all those pieces together. And that's really very accurate. He would say that he makes coffee nervous. And I think that's probably true. I'll say Bob doesn't do anything small. That's for sure from his stature. Most people are really surprised when they meet him in person because he's actually he's tall and he's big. He's got these big, long arms. And so when you take pictures with him, what does he do? He stretches his arms big and wide. Yes, it's great. Bob wrote Love Does, which is a New York Times bestseller, and is millions of copies are around the world. And he has big dreams. He has big dreams for all of us and wants us all to realize it. And then he also put his number at the back of his book. So he gets phone calls all day long. It's very difficult to have a meeting with Bob because he's going to be interrupted every 2 or 3 minutes, and he'll take most of them and he'll talk to them. And I think he's said multiple times he just wants to be available. And I'm
sorry, Jody, for the times I've called him, and you've been in the middle of an important conversation.
It's a true story. But all that to be said, he's just a really inspiring guy to work with and be around because anything is possible. And he tries to communicate that, and you feel like that at any time you're talking to him or you're working with him, that there's nothing too big, there's nothing too out there, there's just let's just go for it. Let's just try it. And let's act. And so that really is the heart of Love Does, is making that first next step. And so many people are paralyzed in so many ways from fear or a whole host of issues. And I think he's been really encouraging to millions of people around the world to just take the next step. If it's dreaming big, if it's loving your neighbor, if it's staying on task, you name it all. He's kind of commented on it, and he's been real encouraging to us and our staff, and I know you as well.
Well, and I think he'd be the first person to admit that it doesn't happen without incredible partners on the ground, without the confidence and faith. I mean, I've been on the receiving end that he believes in people, and the incredible competence of people like yourself that are able to somehow piece together and navigate a lot of moving parts. It's kind of, I was thinking if I was doing your job,
it's
Jody,
like it's drinking from a fire hydrant. Yes, it is.
Yes. And at the same time, performing like mechanical, like working on a car while it's still running, like the inability to kind of do so many things at once in so many complex, but yet with this very simple, hey, we're just doing the next thing, right? Like we're just taking the next step. And speaking of which, you've been working in Love Does in various roles right now. I'd love for you to describe what's it like to be you, because I know you've worked behind the scenes, but not only are you like this executive director that's kind of leading the charge and taking Love Does into this next season of legacy building, but you're out there with refugees in their homes now in San Diego. It's a lot different maybe to what it's becoming this special thing. And what's it like for you working on a day-to-day basis? What are some of the joys, the challenges? Just give us a sneak peek into a day in the life of Jody.
Well, first of all, I'm a wife and a mom. So you put that on top of it, and that makes it even more so a very full day. And so I've got 3 kids. I've got my oldest is in college. I've got one in high school, and then one who is in middle school. And then I'm a wife to the real life Anchorman. He's on TV here in San Diego. So those that have watched that movie, you definitely stay classy. So he's the morning anchor here, and he's gone to 7 Olympics. And so that's always fun because we've gotten to travel around the world in that capacity too. And my background is as a CPA and a fractional CFO. And about 10, 12 years ago, Bob called and said he was starting this nonprofit and he needed a little bit of help. And if I could jump in. A little bit of help. It was going for a while. But anyway, it was great to help from a financial perspective because that was really my expertise at the time. And so it was a relatively small nonprofit at that time. And to see where it has grown, he actually began in this space maybe about 20 years ago, first in India and then expanded pretty quickly after that to Uganda. But to see where it's gone, even in the time I've been there, which is over a decade, has been remarkable. Love Does is in 10 plus countries, and then we've expanded fairly significantly domestically in the last 18 months. So we've got a lot on our plate. I never say I'm bored. There's always something to do, but it really is an awesome place to work. And like you said, no one can do anything by themselves. And so the staff I get to work with, Annie and Drew and Kristen and the whole crew, are really remarkable. And anytime you could put together a team of like-minded people who are humble and generous and kind and just want to love people, it's a really beautiful place to be at this stage in my life.
Yeah. I love that you led with your family, because it's so obvious that that is the most important thing in your life. And I often love, actually, when we would get on a Zoom call, your gentle reminders to me, Tim, to always put my family first. And that's a care you have for me, I know, as a friend, but also for the people that are on the peripherals of the orbits that we live, trying to make a difference in the world, and but also recognizing that back at home is where it's so important. And I love the work that Love Does is doing back at home, from San Quentin prison, where it's like, I'm desperate next time I'm in San Diego to make sure that there's a visit that we go in, or else I'll just
come on in,
or else I'll do a Bob trick and put a electric cable over my shoulder and pretend like I work there, just to get in there and
might be a little bit more tricky to break into San Quentin, but
probably
go for it. I say you try.
But
I will say this, connection's important. And I think connection's been important. It doesn't matter if they're partners on the ground, like you said. I think Love Does has always worked to find some tremendous partners on the ground first, and then from there really build out programs and listen to what the need is. If it's in Iraq or Afghanistan or Somalia or Nepal or Dominican Republic, wherever that might be. And, personally, that probably came from a little bit, for me when I was young. I was super shy. And I remember my mom saying, if you're ever so shy and you're uncomfortable, just ask questions. And I learned early on to ask questions, and then I became pretty good at it. And the great thing is that I enjoyed listening. I enjoyed listening to people. I enjoyed listening to their stories. And so from a very early on age, I learned that connection piece of just hearing people's stories and being present and being patient and listening first. There were some beautiful relationships that came out of it. And that's really been the case with Love Does, I think, throughout its history, is the connection piece of connecting with, first of all, leaders in the local countries, and then expanding around programs there, or if it's in our backyard, connecting with, what is near and dear to your heart, and that's refugees that, a year and a half ago, we used to cross oceans to Afghanistan and start a school there. And then all of a sudden, those refugees were showing up on our shores. And what were we going to do? Of course, we're going to open up the door and say, what do you need? Not only are you welcomed, but you're invited and you're celebrated. And we want to not just call you a program, but you're our friend. And what does that look like? And it starts with connection. It starts with listening. And starts with hearing their stories, and then seeing, how can we help? And asking the questions, how can we help? And then doing it. Doing that next step. And there's a lot of little things that we could do, and there's a lot of big things we can do. And I think real proud of everything we've been able to accomplish in the last 18 months with regard to refugees. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you brought up the refugee community, and you got to be careful with me, because we'll just head down that rabbit hole forever, because it's obviously, it's something I'm so passionate about. Just yesterday, here I go. Yesterday, I drove up to Toowoomba, where it's a 3-hour drive. I drive up there every week and spend time with our small little team up there. And there's been several new families that have moved from Iraq. One was 2 days in their little home, and you walk into their home and they've got nothing, and yet, just a TV in the corner. They don't even have local phones. That they've still got their phone that's connected to their Iraqi number. They're just sitting there on the floor because they've got one couch, but then they don't really want to sit on it. You know exactly. I'm describing a scene for you that
because
you are now
not only
experiencing.
Just 24 hours ago, I was sitting on the floor sharing a meal with refugees in San Diego that we had tried to schedule for a number of weeks, and they were so grateful to have us over. And I said, made a beautiful meal from Afghanistan, and I said, when did you start cooking for this? And it was 24 hours prior.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful privilege and honor and inspiration to be able to be in relationship with people who are so grateful in how they're living out their days and are doing so with courage and are carrying so much, not just in what their future holds, but also carrying loved ones and relatives and family that they know back in their home country, and carrying all of the fears and the needs and the everything that goes along with being in countries of conflict. And so, we just sat and just talked and shared over a meal, because meals are really important in a lot of the countries we work in. And, being on the ground and I came home and one of my kids said, I saw a picture, you didn't sit at a table. And I said, because this is what we had. And, actually they had a table, but because there were so many that wanted to sit around this meal and talk, the floor was wonderful and it was absolutely perfect. And I couldn't have asked for a better meal to spend yesterday afternoon. So yes, in the last 24 hours, I too have shared some wonderful time with refugees.
Don't we have the best?
Yes.
I mean, it's not even a job, but don't we have the best life?
Yes.
When you walk out of that space, you can look in their eyes and you can see there's times when they just want to cry and they're holding it all together. There's times when like you were saying, they're carrying a story that they can't articulate in a language yet. And yet there's not an ounce of bitterness on their persona. Like you said, there's I don't know how to tell their stories. And I think empathy, even as a word, fails to try and demonstrate empathy doesn't even work. One of the things I just love to do, and I think it can only happen when you spend time with them, is tell other people about how wonderful they are and just talk about them, because when you have these experiences, there's nothing that you could say, I don't think, to convince somebody other than to be in their presence is to be accepted and loved and to belong. And it's a gift.
It's a gift, and it's freely given with no strings attached. And like you said, it's a beautiful privilege that we get the honor to share this space with them at a sacred time in their life that they did not expect. And yet we have the opportunity to make a choice, and we all do, to step up in some of those moments. And I think a lot of people feel like you have to do something big, or that it takes you have to wait for this one special time and had special training and maybe have more money or be at a certain time in your life. And I think the answer is now. No.
What do you have now?
What do you have now? And whatever
do you have an hour a week
is more than enough. And I heard recently that legacy isn't leaving something for somebody; it's leaving something in somebody. And even if it's that, even if it's your time that you, just like you said, that just telling their stories, and I think listening, that is such a poignant remark, because I think so much of it is, you hear from so many of these refugees, they have been through something significant. They didn't expect that this was what their life was going to look like. They really didn't. I know somehow we think that they were prepared for it, and they weren't. And they've experienced this story, and just having someone care enough to take the time to listen to their story and then reflect on it in some way, or to just, hold it, is a gift to them as well. And I see that over and over and over. And you see it as you're leaving, saying thank you and goodbye and giving a hug. And somehow the hug is like held on a little bit longer, as if to communicate what words are unable to express in that moment of just deep gratitude. And it happens over and over and over again. And you think it's a one-time event until you have this experience repeatedly, and you recognize that there's something more going on.
It's a reminder to me of, in the work that we do with refugees, often things start with, there's a need, I need to fulfill it and do my duty to my neighbor, whoever they might be. That's hardship has fallen on them for whatever reason. How can I serve and help? The gift is, though, I think in particular with, you've obviously partnering with some wonderful people in Poland that are serving on the front lines, and a lot of the places that you are working in Congo, Afghanistan, you're working with communities that have been displaced, that are in war-torn situations. One of the gifts I found is that they actually, by putting yourself in the position to be in their presence, you're putting yourself, and Bob will say this all the time, right? They're our teachers. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that you're putting yourself in a position where I'm the one that needs to actually change. I'm the one that needs to let them rub off on me. I found that when I lived in Iraq, their culture and their way of life was so much more rich and so much more, or the problems we face in the West and we're struggling with, I feel like they're the antidote to. That they have this ability to create community and belonging that could solve so much of our mental isolation and problems and our materialism and the issues that we're facing. And so it's doing yourself a favor by actually, whatever you give of your resources or time is actually in a really non-altruistic way.
Well, there is
an investment in yourself.
Yes. Anytime I think you have those experiences that allow you to reprioritize things just involuntarily, you want to do more of those things. And as you leave, often a dinner or an event or what it might be, and you walk away and you go, this actually makes it very clear on what's important in life and what isn't. And you don't get very many opportunities to have that different perspective. As you're going on in the busyness of life, it just seems like it's all muddled together. But then when you have those experiences with a refugee or in a country that, we get to visit, and you walk away going, I once again am reminded of the importance of family and relationships and all the really good things in life, peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control and just the goodness, to have that involuntary reminder of how to reprioritize life over and over and over is, again, we keep saying it, but it is a gift.
This episode is brought to you by the Just Travel Company, your socially responsible travel concierge. Just Travel is the best kept secret in culturally immersive and justice-oriented adventures. Allow Just Travel to take the hassle out of your next trip and experience wonder and unearth justice. Discover the just way to travel today. Simply head on over to just-travel.co to learn more and book your next adventure, like our flagship Israel Istanbul trip launching out in mid-July 2023.
Let me ask you a question, because I feel like I've so much, and one of the reasons I really want you on the podcast is so much to learn from you. When you've come away from those meetings and those interactions that remind you what I'm doing is really important, you realize to do more of that isn't to actually just spend all day in people's homes. It's to somehow galvanize and strategize and bring together all these ideas to actually make the reach bigger, not the tower taller, but the reach wider. How do you, because I would book a hour consultancy session with you. Thankfully, I don't have to. But there's probably a bunch of people out there that are trying to start a nonprofit because they're out there trying to get something done, and you've got that unique gift ability to really make things happen, to pull things together. What are some of the big tips? Some of the big advice? What's some of the? It doesn't have to be, what you would put in a course, but just something deep down that is just innate to you that you've learned over the years that you could share with our listeners.
Well, first, what are you passionate about? I think identifying what you're passionate about. And then the next piece of it is, and I think we talked about it earlier, is you think, oh, well, I probably need more education, or I need to wait till I have more money, or I need to wait for this or this or this or this. And so many of those things, that'll never happen. There'll never be a time where it's like all teed up for you. And it's like, okay, now it is. Like I just handed it to you. There's always an element of stepping off the cliff. Always.
Yeah.
And unless you do that, you don't get the experience of jumping into the most like beautiful water ever. You just don't. You don't get it until you step off the cliff. And so I think the next step is take the first step. Just do it. Jump off. And you might make a mistake, and that's okay. It really is. Then get yourself back up and try again. And the fear piece of it really keeps a ton of people from doing what so many of us were created to do. And I am always reminded at many of the places that I've gone to is that you think, oh, well, if I don't do it, probably somebody else will. They won't. I'll just use an example. In Poland right now, there's 1 million Ukrainian refugees that have come into Warsaw, 3 million into Poland. It's overwhelmed all of the systems of the medical system, the educational system, all of it is overwhelmed. And so when we were visiting in March, we visited a refugee center that it's now a convention center that's turned into a refugee center for 6,000 plus.
Yeah.
And these are really mainly women and children who have left their husbands and brothers and grandparent, whoever it might be, to stay and fight in Ukraine. And so there's an element of trauma. There's a big element of trauma that they're trying to work through. And so they're sitting in this refugee center just waiting. And can you imagine all the stuff that's going on in your head? And then to be able to be present for your children during that time, as we've seen in many places, the boredom hits after a while too, just day in and day out. It's the same thing.
We're talking 10 months in now.
You're thinking,
10 months in.
So we very quickly put together a youth center so that the kids had something to do. There was just sports or recreation. And then as the summer kind of progressed and it became apparent that these refugees were not going to go back home, not anytime soon, we got together and we said, let's put together a Love Does school. And so let's create one. And we were somehow the word got out, and the vice president of Warsaw reached out to our contact there and said, what are you doing? I've heard about this, and we're really grateful because our educational system is overwhelmed. And as we understand it, we're the only school that is just for refugee children in Warsaw right now. And they're wanting to duplicate it or expand it and, help us however we can. One of the prerequisites now is that those families coming into this convention center have got to send their kids to our school that is in now the third floor of this convention center, because it gives structure and it gives opportunity and it gives purpose to these days right now. And kids need that. They need that, especially in these formative years. And what that translates is hope, and hope is powerful. And it's really important in this time, especially when things are really uncertain, to have teachers that are trauma informed. This is going to be your days, and it's going to look like this. And so there's purpose to your days while you're waiting to see what life is going to look like in the months and the potentially years to come. And so we're really proud about that. And again, I go back to, well, you know what, if we didn't do it, probably somebody else would have. Nope. No, it's not true. Yeah. And so anyone that's out there that's going, I don't know if I have everything it takes to take that next step, and maybe somebody else would be so much better at it than me to do it. Wrong. You're it. God placed that on your heart and on your mind to take that next step. Do it. Just do it. Yeah. The world is waiting for you to do it. There's a whole host of people that are counting on you to be courageous enough to say, I'm not going to give in to all those fears that keep coming in my head, and I'm still going to just go off and make that next step.
Yes, tag, you're it. It's kind of like you don't get a choice in the matter. You can't look over the shoulder and think that there's someone behind you. I had the privilege of, shortly after you were there, visiting the work that you had started with these two young adults that had part-time jobs that had so much joy and energy. When they walked into that center, it was like this place of darkness, and you're right, there's people lying on cots in an open area with their pets with them, with an open area where everyone's doing their laundry, and then you go to the second floor and suddenly you see these kids running around and they all just jump around these two, I had the sneaking suspicion they were kind of starting to like each other. I don't know if they became an item or not. However, they were just this alive. Yesterday I was in Toowoomba and I call this grandma, her name's Barbara, and she's like known as the Dapira of the grandma of the Yazidi people. And there she is, at the drop of a hat, she's in this home meeting with us. You're a mother of three. There's just no excuses, right? Age is an excuse. Obviously, there's circumstances in our life that mean we can't all get out there and start our own nonprofit or do something, but we can all go across the street, right? We can all do something.
And I think there's small act of kindnesses that go a long way. I maybe told this story to you before, but that same guy who's helping us in Poland, who is remarkable. I just have a ton of respect for him. He told a story when I asked him kind of why he was doing this. And he said that his grandma was Jewish, and they remember not too long ago in World War II that, when Poland was invaded. And so they want to be great neighbors. And he told the story of his grandma, who was really young at the time, and she was walking to the store with her mom, and they were stopped by a Nazi soldier. And it was the beginning of the war, and she said that she felt like she was going to be killed on the spot. And instead, the Nazi soldier kneeled down and actually hugged her and took out of his pocket a piece of chocolate and gave it to her and then ran away. And in the years after that happened, she ended up having to go to the Warsaw, the ghetto, and saw some awful atrocities. She incredibly survived by escaping to the outskirts of the city and riding out the war there. But when she talked about that time, the story she recounted most often was the story of this unexpected act of kindness. And, fast forward a lot of years, this last March, we're there at the train station as refugees are fleeing from Ukraine. And we're at the first train station that they've crossed over the border. And we went to go get a bunch of Kinder eggs, which are, a local favorite. There's a toy inside of a chocolate egg. And so as people got off the train, we would hand them over this egg, and you would see, the lines of worry on their forehead turn into just a smile, because they would remember a different time that was filled with more joy than obviously what was happening now. But what it reminded me again is, we're helping with some really big things in terms of food and stoves and all sorts of basic needs and then schools and all sorts of that. But the small act of kindness, I think, can almost sometimes be as powerful as some of the bigger things. And I think it's really scientific. I think there's when you do things like that, there's oxytocin that's, released in your brain. And I think what it also does is the part of the brain that then is for stress and anxiety and worry, it reduces the activity level in that side as well. And so it's really important just to the health of people that are going through trauma to have some of these small acts of kindness intersect in their lives. And that can happen, honestly, to anybody, anywhere. You go into your local coffee shop and you intersect with somebody there who's having a tough day. You might have any idea what's going on. And you hold the door open, or you smile, or you ask them something little, or you pay for their coffee unexpectedly. And that same experience can happen to the person that you have no idea what's happening in their life too. And it's really powerful. And the more that we do it, the more that I think, we have the gift of what it does for us, but imagine if we just all tried to do that just 10% more in our lives. There's never been a time that I've been alive that I feel like the world doesn't need it more. That's for sure, especially coming out of COVID, right?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I remember, speaking of which, I remember just having recovered from COVID. I was going to be spending some more time with you in San Diego, and you treated me to one of your favorite things. What was it? A ginger?
Oh, a ginger shot.
A ginger shot.
With cayenne.
I think in that moment, with cayenne, with pepper, right?
Yeah.
Of course.
See, you were all better.
I was all better. I was just like totally invincible after that.
Hey, there's nothing like toasting ginger shots at lunch with your friend. It takes it to a new level. You're like, yes, we're super healthy now, ready to go.
This is what I love. This is what it's, to work for Jody. If you guys want to volunteer, Love does. They need interns all the time. You get ginger shots at lunchtime. I mean, who wouldn't want to work with you? It's so much fun. Speaking of experiences, you've got to travel a lot, as you've said. We got to travel together. Mm-hmm. We were in how much fun was that? I mean,
awesome. You're awesome. You're awesome to travel with. Yeah, you're so generous and so kind. It's a way of life for you. Go ahead. All right.
No, we met some amazing people, right? Like and this is the beautiful thing when you purposefully, this is the one thing about, I think, this common denominator of Bob, and it's not just Bob, it's so many other people in our lives. The people that are attracted, when you do good, the energy and the spirit and the joy, life is just fun. And even in a place like Israel. So it was, for me, I've been there several times. Was it your first, Jody, or a second?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's an incredible place, and there's some mischief being planned to do some stuff in that part of the world. I know Bob's taken a few groups there next year. But it's this place of it's in the news all the time. We crossed the border remember when we were like, should we stop and talk to that guy? And I'm like, screw it. We're just going to go straight through.
That's right.
There's no way we're getting out.
No. What's the worst that can happen? Actually, some bad things, but
there's a lot of bad things. I think there's been some bombs that have dropped in that area since then, and some terrible. I mean, without making a joke of it, it is a place that is in the news, and there we were weaving through these streets. I still don't know how I didn't manage to crash the car.
Gracefully, yep.
Yeah, but. The beautiful people in the midst of such complexity, this world just doesn't make sense. And, can you share a bit about what does it do when you walk into, Israel or the West Bank?
Well, I just heard this recently, that community is not the absence of conflict, but it's the presence of a reconciling spirit. And I love that because, in a place,
Say that again.
Community is not the absence of conflict, but it's the presence of a reconciling spirit. And I love it because, in a place like Israel or in Somalia, we were talking to them recently. I was bringing up a story of an Afghan refugee who actually was walking. They were just talking about kind of their PTSD experiences that they've been having since coming. And I was putting a name to it. They'd never heard of it. And so I was sharing that with some of our staff in Somalia. And she said, we don't have PTSD because there is no post. And that's really the same in Israel as well. And
there isn't.
So you're going to have conflict, but you can have community in conflict as well. And who among us wants to stand up and say, we want to be the reconcilers? We want to be the people that bring peace. We want to be the people that love our neighbor so well that peace is inevitable, at least between the two of us. And I think that's it can be really powerful. And we've done it a lot through education and in terms of schools, and showing up to places and saying, how can we help? And, finding who is kind of the least of these in that area and saying, what do you need? We want to be helpful and showing up in that way too.
That community isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of a reconciling spirit. How can we, what a beautiful thing to take into your day to day, right? Like whether it be, we're on the back end of Thanksgiving and holidays and family gatherings, or whether it be at work, it's building community, building a place is actually just wanting to take the first step towards reconciliation. Mm-hmm. What a gold nugget for anybody listening today. Because what that focus of just, if I can just take a first step towards reconciling, doesn't have to be, we don't have to solve the Middle East peace conflict, right? We just need to solve who in my life is there tension with. That's not a bad thing. I love the fact that you're not saying it's a bad thing that there's conflict or that's a bad thing that there's tension. That's just kind of like,
but what do you do in the midst of it? Even in a horrible situation. What do you do in
the midst of it?
Think of our friend, the Nazi soldier, my friend whose grandma encountered the Nazi soldier, who even in that situation, obviously you would think he was incredibly conflicted, as well he should have been, and yet provides a piece of chocolate in that. In any situation, wherever you're at, you have a choice to make that situation better, even if you're in an awful situation yourself. And the power of what that can do, It's
like if I were to say, what does love does do? That sounds really complicated.
Well,
but you know what? Love does what? Love does.
I think it shows up in the most difficult of situations and places and finds a way to love its neighbor well, extraordinarily well. In a way that they walk away and say, what just happened there? And often it does come with balloons and whimsy and unexpected Kinder eggs or what it might be, but it's because there's power when you love your neighbor.
And sometimes it doesn't get reciprocated, right?
That's okay.
And I love how that's okay. And it's not about the end result. It's just, this is what I have to do because it's the only thing I can do. Just because when is the time when you've really most felt like you belonged? It doesn't have to be the most time, but is there a memory? Is there a time it could be from your childhood. It could be just recent. It could be where you just had that feeling, you know what? I belong.
I think the times I feel most like that is when I get to do the stuff that I was made for. And some of that is being a mom because I love my kids and I love kids in general. I want to champion them. I think they're awesome, fascinating
and
creatures.
You have some awesome kids.
And I have awesome kids.
I love to see you champion.
I have awesome kids that I love to champion their friends too. And I'm grateful that I get the opportunity to do that. From an early age, my mom asked, I remember my parents asking, what do you want to do for a living? And I was like, I want to be a social worker. And I remember them saying, it's pretty tough to make a living doing that, whatever it was. And I was really good at math and they kind of encouraged me to go into the math field. And of course I became a CPA and fractional CFO and all sorts of things. And that really served me well. But it's interesting because that feeling of wanting to help and be a social worker stayed with me kind of through my whole life. I remember, maybe 10, 15 years ago when I had like 3 kids under the age of 5. And I would go into these groups with moms and I would say, can we do something else? Like besides just kind of taking them to the park, and maybe I was working during that time too. And they'd say, no, this is about it. And I was like, God, I feel like we could help some more people or do some stuff. And they said, I kind of think that's just you. But again, it feels like God placed that on my heart for a reason. And it wasn't the right time to do to go full on that. And I think sometimes God places that stuff on your heart and the answer is, hey, that's a real thing, but wait for a while until the time is right. I've often kind of used the analogy of football. I love sports, American football, and if you're the
Kansas City, what's it? The
Kansas City Chiefs.
No. What's the
Kansas Jayhawks?
Chalk Rock?
Yes. The basketball. I love it. They're the reigning national.
Sorry, Chalk Rock.
Yeah,
I gotta
Chalk
bring that in.
They're the reigning national champions. Anyway,
sorry. Okay, you love sports.
But in football, the running back is running, and they have a blocker in front of you, and you can't really see what you're supposed, what's happening until they block and a hole opens up, and at that time, you're supposed to run through it. Right? You run as fast as you can through it.
Just go.
And it can be really frustrating when you feel like there's stuff that's been on your heart or you're made to do something and you can't find the opportunity yet to run through yet. It just is all dark. And I love thinking that there's, maybe there's angels blocking in front of you and just wait. And then there's going to be a hole that opens up. And when it does, run through it, sprint through it, go through it, because there's just joy and peace and all sorts of things on the other side. And I think, that happened, I think, when Bob called, however many years ago, to say, hey, would you help here? And then when the opportunity arose to take a larger leadership role, and then sitting in the homes of Afghan refugees, or helping to resettle Ukrainian refugees, or being in San Quentin prison with prisoners that exhibit such grace and mercy. It's such a beautiful, life-changing thing to listen to their stories and how a lot of the stuff is being redeemed and still being redeemed. To be able to be in Uganda at a school that started with 9 kids in a post-war country that now has 1,400 kids and has really become the jewel of northern Uganda, has educated the future doctors and lawyers and engineers of that country, or to be in the Dominican Republic with the women's resource centers, and to give opportunities to women who previously didn't have those, and what they're capable of doing, not only just for themselves, but they're for communities. And when I sit in those spaces and I get to be in those places, you walk away and it's a moment. It's a moment in your car. It's a moment on the plane. It's a moment as you're going to sleep that you think, I was made for this. And how cool it is, because not everybody gets the opportunity to, and I get it.
Right.
But how cool it is that I got the opportunity. One, I said yes, but that I got the opportunity to do what I was made to do. And that's a beautiful place to be. And that's where I feel like I belong the most.
Wow. And I'm grateful that I get to be a part of it in a small way, that we get to... In
a big way, a lot of times too.
Yeah, it's true. But it just... It's been so much fun, spending a little bit more time. I think the first time we met was
a while ago. I think it was
extremely briefly at Love Does offices.
Maybe 5-7 years ago or something.
The times are blurred, but you've got some big things planned. You guys celebrated 20 years. We've got some exciting things on the horizon together as well. How can people get involved? And I know this isn't just you can give, you can volunteer, but where people want to, I know they're going to be listening to this and where do they go? Just tell them, where do they go to give? Where do they go to volunteer and to serve if they're in the San Diego area? And I think, there's always their neighbor across the street, which we can encourage them to go to, which, if all else fails and they can't get a hold of you, or it's so far.
I think you start there. I really do. I think if you don't know the names of the people that are surrounding you, if it's in an apartment building or if it's in a cul-de-sac, you know what, make it a goal by the end of the year to know their names at a minimum. You can bring them candies, whatever it is. It's Christmas time. It's a perfect opportunity. But lovedoes.org is our organization. Yes. So go there. There's lots of information. You can sign up for our weekly.
Isn't there it's really great? Right now, people can partner to provide toys for Ukrainian refugees for Christmas.
Well, I love that you're so on it, Tim. You're so good. Yes, we've got toys for Ukrainian refugees.
How fun would that be?
Yes, we're opening up a teen mom home. And so we're now furnishing this teen mom home. We need blenders. We need toasters. We need diapers. we have a bigger outreach just to single moms.
Anyone can go out and buy a blender when they're out Christmas shopping.
Or
Come on,
just some tea
buy a
towels,
blender,
whatever
or just
that
you can
might
go
be.
on Amazon, right?
It's an Amazon wish list, so you can link to that and bless this home and know that for years to come that your saucer that you gave or your pan that you gave is being used to love some women who needed it and some little babies who now will have a better future because of whatever you gave. But I'll say this, Tim, they should go to youbelong.org and they go there because that is your heart. And, as I've never believed that it was like either or, the pie just gets bigger. And I love championing everything that you're doing. I love your heart. I trust your heart. I know you just want to do the most good you can in this world with everything you've been given. And so go there first. I think that's the best place. But I would agree, at your local Starbucks or coffee shop or backyard, school, whatever it might be, there's a great place.
What's so fun is you invite people in the opportunity to return the favor. And by that, I mean, you give them the opportunity. We have this older couple next door to us that these two ladies that are just the sweetest thing, and they love our kids so much, and they love we got a new puppy, Winnie. Remember we were talking about getting a puppy when we were in Israel, and I caved. I caved in. Yep. And my wife several times has wanted to return it because we have 4 kids, and it feels like now she has 5 kids, and now because I'm the big kid in the family, but now we have this extra thing. But they're constantly they're bringing over dog food for our puppy Winnie, and they're bringing over banana bread for our kids. And when you take that first step to maybe give or extend a hand to somebody else, it's giving them permission to want to return the favor, not in a like, I have to, but it's this oh, that's what we do. Life is giving and receiving. And if you can't receive, you certainly aren't going to be a very good giver.
Well, it's a connection, and that's what we're made for. We are made for relationships. We're made for community. We're made for connection. And you're exactly right. We have the same thing. We've got neighbors next door. They could never have kids. They're older now. At the time, my 5-year-old went over with a coloring picture 2 weeks after we moved in, and that was 8 years ago. And every week since, up into COVID, my youngest baked and gardened with our neighbor. And we have walked through a whole bunch of stuff. And now, again, they could never have kids, so they've really become like our parents and grandparents, pseudo-grandparents.
Wow.
And he is in his middle 80s, and he's kind of having some medical issues now and can no longer do chores around the house. So now my 17-year-old son goes over every week and helps with chores. And in the meantime is learning how to do, he's just an amazing guy. This guy, he's learning all sorts of electrical, how to change electrical issues. He's doing all sorts of carpentry and learning. And so now it's like this, both ways it's going. It's a blessing to them, and it's a blessing to my 17-year-old. So much so, and teenagers and boys. Yeah. And when I asked if he would go over, they wanted to pay him. And he said, please, I don't want to take any money. I would be happy to do it. That, what does it take for a 17-year-old boy at the time of life to say, I would love to go do chores. I won't do maybe chores happily.
No, he won't clean his room, but he'll certainly go over there.
I'm happy to go over to my neighbors and do chores for as long as they want, for nothing in return. And that's because over the years, they've got cookies, and it's just a relationship, and you can't help but want to give. And that's what we're all invited to do with all sorts of people throughout our whole life. And so to not do it is to miss out on the blessings that would come from it.
Well, I cannot wait to re-listen to this episode. Thankfully, we probably won't need to edit too much. But that's what Love Does so well. At the heart of what you do, it's relationship, it's serving people, it's loving people. Go to lovedoes.org. And if you're in the San Diego area, definitely make sure you hit them up and volunteer some time. There's so many ways that I'm sure you could put them to use, Jody, with your wonderful team.
Yeah, reach out. We'd love to get you involved.
Yeah.
And then Tim, we get to see you hopefully soon too. We got to figure out our next adventure. There's lots of adventures in the future. I know.
It's going to be so much fun. It is. It's been wonderful, actually. On that note, driving back up to Toowoomba every week and being in that community. It's funny how sometimes we think we've got to go to the other side of the world, and you've been on a little journey with me on that. But it's so funny how right in front of us, staring us in the face, is so many opportunities. So if you're listening to this, hopefully you're inspired to tag. You're it. Get out there. Just do it. Don't look over the shoulder and think someone else is going to do it. Jody, you shared so much of your joy and your passion and your wisdom with us and with me. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Always wonderful to be with you, and you're an encouragement to me, and I know that will be the same for years to come. So, hey, thank you, and thanks to all your listeners as well. I can't wait to hear all the wonderful things they're going to do, and I know it's going to happen. So,
Thanks, Jody.
Thanks.
Thanks for making it to the end of another episode of Justice Matters with Tim Buxton. It is an immense privilege to share these conversations and inspiring people with you. To learn more about how you can get involved or learn more about today's guest, head on over to the show notes or episode description. This podcast was produced by the master himself, Jose Biotto, with just a little bit of help from me. The featured music is the song Turning Over Tables by the Brilliance. Lastly, to my Patreon community out there, thank you so much for your support and generosity. Without you, this podcast would not be possible. If you'd like to become a patron and get exclusive access to behind the scenes content, visit patreon.com/Justice Matters and start your Give What You Can monthly contribution today, and join me and so many others in creating a world where everyone belongs. Until next time, thank you for subscribing and sharing this podcast with your friends. Justice Matters with Tim Buxton acknowledges and pays respect to the past, present and future traditional custodians and elders of this nation, now known as Australia, and the continuation of cultural, spiritual and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples.